All right, let's dive in. Today, we're going to try something a little different. We're going to understand a massive moment in American history, not by looking at some big battle or a famous leader, but through the eyes of one single teenager living on the frontier. So let's step back in time.
So ask yourself this, what was it really like to be 15 back in 1865? I mean, before smartphones, before the internet, before high school as we know it, heck, before cars. What did that world even look and feel like? That's the question we're tackling by zooming way in on one person's life.
And our guide for this whole journey is a young man named Torger Sjursen. The setting? The American frontier. We're talking Wisconsin, right as the Civil War is breathing its last breath. And that year, 1865, it's absolutely crucial. In April, the Civil War finally, brutally comes to an end. The entire country is standing on the edge of enormous change. And, as we'll see, so is our main character. And here he is, Torger Sjursen, 15 years old. He's not a general, he's not a politician you'd read about in a textbook. He's just a regular kid, really, living in a small farming community. But his story tells us so much about what it took to build this country. So, let's step inside his home. What was it like? Well, you have to imagine this bustling, bilingual world. It was basically a little piece of Norway that had been picked up and dropped right into the middle of the American Midwest. And his house was full. I mean, look at this. You've got his father, Sjur, who's already 61, his mother, Brita, and then his 3 younger siblings. Now, as the oldest son at 15, Torger would have carried a huge amount of responsibility for every single person in this family. But there was a shadow in this home, too. It was a place shaped by real tragedy. The family had lost another son, Matthias, right after they immigrated about 9 years earlier. And that loss, it was a quiet but constant reminder of the incredible risks they took just to get here. And they weren't alone, which is so important. Their whole community in Deerfield was packed with other immigrant families, a lot of them from the same exact region back in Norway. So this created a world where you'd hear Norwegian being called out across the fields and then hear English in the town market. It was a true blend of the old world and the new. Now, if you think your chores are tough or you have a demanding job, let's just take a quick look at Torger's daily reality. Because at 15, he was already working like a full-grown man. I mean, just look at this list. His day started before the sun was even up, from taking care of the animals and plowing the fields to splitting cords of wood and harvesting crops. His life was just this constant cycle of incredibly demanding physical labor. There were no weekends off when the farm needed something from you. But here's the thing. This wasn't just mindless work. It was an apprenticeship. In the middle of all these chores, Torger was learning carpentry from his dad and the other men in the community. And that skill would become the trade that defined his entire adult life. Okay, so if he was working that much, you're probably wondering, what about school? Well, his education was just as practical and just as demanding as everything else in his life. This chart just perfectly captures the split in Torger's world. He was living with a foot in 2 different cultures. He was truly bilingual. Norwegian was the language of home, of church, of family traditions. But English was the language of his future. It was the key to doing business, to making his way in this new country. He was, in a very real way, the bridge between his parents' world and his own. And as for formal schooling, that had to squeeze in wherever it could. He probably went to a little one-room schoolhouse, but only when the farm didn't need him, during the slow winter months. The second it was time to plant or harvest, the fields were his classroom. Okay, so it sounds like it was all hardship and nonstop labor, right? Well, not exactly. There was also community, there was faith, and there was a social world that gave his life a really vital sense of balance. And at the absolute center of that world was the church. For this Norwegian immigrant community, the Lutheran church was, well, it was everything. It wasn't just a place you went on Sunday. It was the hub for news, for socializing, for keeping your culture alive. It was the glue that held literally everyone together. And as you can see, there was still plenty of fun to be had. From fishing and ice skating in the winter to celebrating traditional Norwegian holidays with folk music and stories. Even work events like a barn raising were actually huge social gatherings where all the young people could meet and hang out. So you take all of this, the insane work ethic, the close family, the tight-knit community,
And you realize it was all building something. It was building the foundation for his future. That year, 1865, wasn't just another year for Torger. It was the year he stood right on the threshold, transforming from a boy into the man he was about to become. See, in his world, coming of age wasn't about getting a driver's license or going to prom. It meant mastering the skills you needed to actually survive and, hopefully, to thrive. It was about forging the resilience and the work ethic that would become the absolute bedrock of his entire life. This timeline just lays it all out so clearly. He gets here as a little kid, totally new to this land. By 1865, he's a critical part of his family's survival. And then, just 11 years after that, he's a U.S. citizen, ready to get married and start his own family. The boy from 1865 was the blueprint for the man he became. So here's the bottom line. Those grueling, tough teenage years on the frontier, they weren't just a phase he went through. They were everything. The lessons he learned about hard work, about community, about navigating two different cultures, those were the tools he used to build a long and successful 82-year life.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question. Torger's story is his own, of course, but it's also the story of millions of others. A story of immigration, of unbelievable hard work, of adaptation. It really makes you wonder, how does the story of one single teenager in one small town, in one pivotal year, end up revealing the story of an entire nation?